I thought it was some twisted prank at first, until I saw the bruises on his face and the way he looked directly at the camera. Not past it, at me. I didn't even want to click the link, but he pushed for it. He said, "What's the worst that could happen?" I should have pushed back harder, said no, or just left. But I didn't. And now I see his face every time I close my eyes. I'd never really clicked with anyone like him before. Callum had this dry, brutal sense of humor, the kind where you're not sure if he's joking or just being a dick until he smirks. We met through this niche Discord server for analog horror fans, ended up on the same voice chat one night, stayed up till 3 a.m. talking about everything from cursed YouTube videos to those weird VHS RGs no one finishes. It turned out we lived one town apart, about 20 minutes by train. After that, it wasn't just online anymore. We'd hang out, get takeaway, crash at each other's places. He always had something playing on his second monitor, usually unsettling internet rabbit holes or weird live streams from countries neither of us could pronounce. I quite liked the chaos, to be honest. He made everything feel more intense, more alive. But that edge, I didn't realize how real it would get. The last time I saw him was a Thursday. We were meant to meet up Saturday. He was supposed to help me move some furniture, but he ghosted. At first, I assumed hangover, or maybe he'd just forgotten. But then Sunday passed, then Monday. I went by his flat after work. Lights were off, curtains drawn, door locked. But outside there were 4 Uber Eats bags, one of them half split open. Ice cream melted through the bottom. I reported him missing Tuesday morning. The woman at the desk in the police station barely looked up, scribbled his name down, nodded like it was routine, like he was routine, said they'd log it and send someone round if anything came up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about one of those bags of food, how the receipt had the wrong name. J something, not Callum, not even close. I went back to his flat the next day and just sat there across the street, watching. Then, late that evening, I got a message from his account. Just a single link. No words, no emojis, no subject. The URL was long and messy, no preview. But I recognized one thing, the string.onion buried inside it. I told myself maybe it was him messing with me, a prank, something he'd find hilarious later. I copied it, but I didn't open it. Not yet. I finally caved that Friday. I booted up Tor, pasted the link in, and just sat there watching it buffer. The site was crude. It had a black background, one embedded player, no controls, just a timer in the corner and a blank title bar. Then it loaded. It was him, Callum, sitting in a dark room, shirtless, pale, face swollen, lips split, and then he looked straight at the camera, not like he was looking at a lens, like he was looking through it, at me. I wasn't sure if it was a recording or not, so I screen recorded what I could. My hands were shaking so bad the mouse kept chittering. Soon after, I went back to the police. I thought it would be different this time. It wasn't. They asked why I had the footage, why I hadn't come in sooner. They even asked what my relationship with him was. And when I said we were friends, they paused. One of them asked, real quiet, "Just friends?" I walked out, deleted the screen capture from my phone on the way home. I was scared they'd take it, or worse, say I did something to him. I started staying at my parents'. They live outside town. No one knew I was there. I didn't post anything about it. I didn't tell anyone, and my phone stayed off most nights. But then, On Saturday morning, someone rang the bell. My mum called me to the door. "Did you order something?" I went downstairs to find her holding a parcel. No label, no address, just my name. Inside the parcel was a USB stick, nothing else. I didn't plug it into anything right away. I waited until later that day, until everyone had gone to bed. When it felt safe, I plugged it into my old laptop. It felt smarter. It has no Wi-Fi. After it had eventually loaded, the only file on it was a video. There was no title, just a date. The same day I got the message. I hesitated, but then I pressed play. It opened. It was me, sitting at my desk, staring at my monitor, typing. I didn't even remember that moment, but it was definitely me. I had the same clothes I usually wore at home, and the angle. Someone had been in the flat across from mine, filming me, watching me. Then the camera cut, and I saw him again. Callum. He was on his knees, shaking. Behind him, there was a plastic sheet, a roll of duct tape, and something metallic, glinting. He tried to speak. His lips moved, but there was no sound. Then I saw it. A hand, just the edge of one, came into frame. And everything after that I should have looked away. I should have closed it, but I didn't. I couldn't. The moment he stopped breathing, the stream cut out. Back to black. They never found him. The police closed the case 2 weeks later. They declared it an unsubstantiated report, whatever that means. I wiped my old drives, burned the USB and switched phones. I'm not sure how much good it'll do. You don't have to listen to me. I realize I'm just a stranger to you, but if you ever get sent a Red Room link, even as a joke, don't click it. Just don't. Found you. I think the most important lesson I've learned is that some threats don't announce themselves with dramatic music or warning signs. They slip quietly into your life through the devices you trust most. I learned this 3 months ago, and I haven't slept properly since. I work in digital marketing for a medium-sized agency in Bristol. Nothing particularly exciting, mostly managing social media campaigns and designing promotional materials for local businesses. I've always been glued to my phone, both for work and personal use. My girlfriend used to joke that I'd scroll through Instagram, even during the apocalypse. Ex-girlfriend now, actually. We broke up around a month before all this started. Nothing dramatic. Just one of those relationships that gradually fades out when you realize you're better as friends. After the breakup, I moved into a small flat on the outskirts of the city. One of those newer builds with paper-thin walls where you can hear your neighbors sneeze. I developed this habit of scrolling through my phone in bed before sleep. Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever would keep my mind occupied. I'd always leave my AirDrop on, mainly because I frequently shared files between my phone and laptop, and I was too lazy to keep turning it on and off. I never really thought about the security implications. Why would I? I lived in a decent area, and most AirDrop requests were just people sharing memes on public transport. It was a Tuesday night in early March when it happened. I remember, because I'd had a particularly tedious day at work dealing with a client who couldn't decide what shade of blue they wanted for their logo. I'd gotten into bed around midnight, flat dark except for the blue glow of my phone screen, illuminating my face as I mindlessly scrolled through social media. Outside, a light rain tapped against my bedroom window, and somewhere in the distance, A car alarm kept going off intermittently. That's when the airdrop notification appeared on my screen. Unknown device would like to share a photo. The preview thumbnail was too small to make out clearly, but it looked like some kind of map or location pin. Normally, I'd have declined any random airdrop requests, but something about being half asleep and curious made me accept it. It's amazing how one thoughtless tap can change everything. The photo loaded, and I immediately felt more alert. It was a Google Maps screenshot with a red pin dropped on a specific location. Below the image were coordinates typed in plain text. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably someone trying to send their location to a friend and accidentally airdropping it to me instead. But something about it made me uncomfortable enough to actually check the coordinates. I copied the numbers and pasted them into Google Maps. The map centered and zoomed in on a location that made my blood run cold. It was my street. Not just my street, but specifically my block of flats. I sat up in bed suddenly wide awake. This had to be a coincidence, right? Maybe a neighbor was trying to send their address to someone and misclicked. I stared at my phone, half expecting another airdrop to come through with an apology or explanation. None came. I got out of bed and went to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out at the street below. The rain had picked up, blurring the streetlights into hazy orange globes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No suspicious figures standing under lampposts. No parked cars with people sitting inside them. Just the empty street, wet pavement reflecting the lights. I turned off AirDrop, put my phone on silent, and tried to sleep. I told myself it was nothing. A random coincidence, a technical glitch, or at worst, some neighbor playing a prank. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about those coordinates and how precisely they matched my location. The next morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. In the harsh light of day, the incident seemed less sinister. I even turned AirDrop back on, though I set it to contacts only rather than everyone. I went to work, had another mundane day arguing about color schemes, and returned home feeling foolish about my midnight paranoia. That night, as I was once again in bed scrolling through my phone, another notification appeared. Not AirDrop this time, but an email. The subject line was simply the same coordinates from the night before. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters at a domain I didn't recognize. My thumb hovered over the notification for several seconds before I finally tapped it. The email contained no text, just an attachment, a photo. When I opened it, I felt my stomach drop. It was a picture of me from earlier that day, standing at my kitchen window, washing dishes. The photo had clearly been taken from somewhere outside my flat, looking in. I immediately closed the blinds and checked that my door was locked. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved from room to room, making sure all windows were secured. I considered calling the police but hesitated. What would I tell them? That someone sent me coordinates and a photo? They'd hardly consider that an emergency. Instead, I called a friend who works in IT security. I tried to sound calm as I explained what had happened, but there was an edge to my voice that I couldn't hide. He asked about my online presence, whether I'd made anyone angry recently, if I used the same passwords across multiple sites, standard security questions that did nothing to address the fact that someone was physically watching me. He suggested I reset all my passwords, enable two-factor authentication, and check for any unusual apps or permissions on my devices. I did all of that, and also went through my social media, removing location tags from photos and tightening privacy settings. For good measure, I disconnected my smart TV and even put tape over my laptop's webcam. Paranoid, perhaps, but at that point, I didn't care. I barely slept that night, keeping one eye on the door and the other on my phone, which I'd set to airplane mode. The next day at work, I was distracted and irritable. Every notification made me jump, and I kept feeling like someone was watching me. My boss noticed and suggested I take the rest of the week off. I didn't argue. When I got home, I found a small package leaning against my door. No postmark, no delivery information, just a padded envelope with my name handwritten on the front. I stood in the hallway staring at it for what felt like minutes, afraid to touch it. Eventually, I used a pen to drag it inside before closing and locking the door behind me. I should have called the police then. I should have left it unopened. But curiosity, that same fatal curiosity that had made me accept the airdrop, got the better of me. I carefully opened the envelope, half expecting it to contain something dangerous. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The paper contained more coordinates, different from the first set. When I checked them on my phone, they pointed to a location about 20 miles outside the city, in a rural area I wasn't familiar with. Against my better judgment, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained a single video file. I clicked play and immediately wished I hadn't. The video showed someone, me, from various angles throughout the previous week. Me leaving my flat in the morning. Me at a cafe near my office. Me shopping at the supermarket. Me through the windows of my flat at night. The footage was clearly taken over several days from different locations, sometimes zoomed in from a distance, sometimes from frighteningly close proximity. The final clip was the most disturbing. It showed me asleep in my bed, filmed from inside my bedroom. The camera moved closer until it was directly over me, looking down at my unconscious face. A gloved hand appeared in the frame, hovering just above my cheek, not quite touching. The video ended with text appearing on screen. The coordinates are a meeting place. Come alone tomorrow at midnight, or the next video goes to everyone in your contact list. I know things about you that would destroy your life. I ripped the USB drive out of my laptop and threw it across the room. Someone had been in my flat. Someone had stood over me while I slept. I grabbed my phone and keys and ran out the door, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove straight to a friend's house on the other side of the city. I told my friend I'd had a break-in, which wasn't entirely untrue. I spent that night on their sofa, jumping at every sound. In the morning, I went to the police station and reported everything. The airdrop, the email, the USB, the video. They took it seriously, especially the footage from inside my flat, but warned me that these cases were difficult to solve. Whoever was doing this was tech-savvy and careful. They advised me not to go to the coordinates and to stay with friends until they could investigate further. I didn't go to the meeting place, of course. I'm not that stupid. Instead, I stayed at my friend's place, changed all my contact information, and eventually moved to a different city altogether. The police never found who was responsible. They suggested it might be connected to the dark web, possibly someone who had accessed my personal information through data breaches and decided to target me for their own twisted entertainment. It's been 3 months now. I've moved twice more since then. I don't use social media anymore. I've changed my name. I keep AirDrop permanently disabled and check for cameras everywhere I go. I sleep with the lights on when I manage to sleep at all. No more videos have appeared, no more coordinates. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I could swear I hear the soft click of a camera shutter. And occasionally, My phone will light up with a notification from an unknown sender that disappears before I can open it. The police have a theory that I was targeted through a dark web service where people pay to have strangers stalked, a form of entertainment for those sick enough to enjoy watching someone's life unravel from fear. They call it real-life streaming or surveillance tourism. The idea that someone paid to watch me, to terrify me, to turn my life into their personal horror show, keeps me awake at night more than any bump in the dark ever could. Because the thing about the dark web is that it's not just some abstract digital space. It's a marketplace where your privacy, your security, your peace of mind can be bought and sold without your knowledge. And once you've been chosen, you never really know if they've stopped watching or just gotten better at hiding. Sometimes I wonder about those coordinates, about what would have happened if I'd gone to that meeting place, but I know I made the right choice. Some questions are better left unanswered, because on the dark web, your life is just content for someone else's entertainment, and the show only ends when they decide it does. It's strange what a simple dare can lead to. They say curiosity killed the cat, but no one tells you about the part where the cat spends months afterward looking over its shoulder, jumping at shadows, and sleeping with one eye open. I've debated sharing this for almost a year now. My therapist thinks it would help to externalize the experience, but I can't bring myself to tell her the whole story. Some things you just can't explain to someone whose darkest online experience is probably accidentally clicking on a pop-up ad. So I'm writing it here instead, anonymously, maybe as a warning, maybe just to convince myself it really happened. Everything started last autumn, during that weird limbo week between Christmas and New Year, when time seems to lose all meaning. I was staying at my flat in Leeds, rather than going home to my parents in Newcastle, partly because train tickets were ridiculously expensive, and partly because I needed some time alone after a rather messy breakup in early December. My flatmate had gone to his girlfriend's for the holidays, so I had the place to myself, just me, a stack of leftover Christmas chocolates, and an endless stream of mediocre content on Netflix. I was slouched on our sagging sofa one evening, laptop balanced precariously on my stomach, mindlessly scrolling through social media while some forgettable crime documentary played in the background. The radiator was making that annoying ticking sound it always did when it was heating up, and I could hear the neighbors upstairs apparently rearranging their furniture for the 5th time that week. My phone buzzed with a message from my friend Alex. We'd known each other since 6th form and still kept in regular contact despite ending up at different universities. Alex and I had this ongoing thing where we dare each other to try increasingly bizarre internet challenges or explore strange online rabbit holes. It had started years ago with innocent stuff like spend an hour on Wikipedia following random links and see where you end up, but had gradually evolved into more obscure corners of the internet. Nothing illegal, just weird, odd forums, bizarre YouTube channels, that sort of thing. His message that night was different though. He was daring me to explore the dark web. He'd sent me a link to a tutorial on how to set it up safely, along with some starting points. Apparently, he tried it himself the previous week. I remember hesitating, my thumb hovering over the link. I knew what the dark web was, of course, that hidden part of the internet not accessible through normal browsers, often associated with illegal activities, but also used by people in countries with heavy internet censorship or journalists protecting sources. I should mention I was studying computer science, specializing in network security. So there was a part of me that was professionally curious about how these hidden networks functioned. I told myself it would be educational, a practical application of the theory we'd covered in class. That's how I justified it anyway, though in reality, it was probably more about not wanting to back down from a dare and having absolutely nothing better to do with my evening. I followed the tutorial, downloading the special browser needed to access .onion sites, setting up a VPN for an extra layer of security, all the recommended precautions. I remember the heating had kicked in properly by then, making the flat almost uncomfortably warm. I'd peeled off my Christmas jumper, an ironic one with a dinosaur wearing a Santa hat, and was just in a t-shirt, the fabric sticking slightly to my back. There was a half-empty mug of tea on the coffee table, long gone cold. Outside, it had started to rain, droplets pattering against the window in that soothing, rhythmic way that usually made me sleepy. But I wasn't sleepy. There was a nervous energy buzzing through me as I waited for the browser to connect, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The boring documentary had ended, replaced by something equally forgettable that served as white noise in the background. The browser finally connected, and I was in. At first glance, it was anticlimactic. Just a different browser with a search engine that looked more basic than what I was used to. Alex had sent me some beginner links, mostly forums discussing privacy and technology, nothing particularly sinister. I browsed for about an hour, finding it interesting, but not especially shocking. Most of it was stuff you could find on the regular internet if you knew where to look. I was almost disappointed, having expected something more dramatic based on the dark web's reputation. That's when I made my first mistake. Instead of sticking to the links Alex had sent, I decided to follow some of the links I found on those forums, curious to see where they led. Each new site had more links, and I kept following them, going deeper and deeper into this hidden network. It was like pulling on a loose thread and watching an entire garment unravel. I noticed the tone of the sites changing subtly. The discussions moved from privacy and technology to more questionable topics. How to acquire false identification, discussions about substances and services that were clearly illegal. I should have stopped then, should have closed the browser and gone back to my mindless Netflix scrolling. But there's a strange momentum to exploration like this. Each new discovery makes you wonder what else is hiding just one more link away. I remember shifting position on the sofa, my back starting to ache from being hunched over for so long. The rain had intensified, now hammering against the windows, and the wind had picked up, making the old frames rattle. My cold tea had developed that unappealing skin on top that always made me shudder. The flat suddenly felt too quiet despite the background noise of the TV and the storm outside. It was approaching midnight when I found it. I'd been following a particularly convoluted chain of links, each site more disturbing than the last. I'd gone from marketplace sites selling illegal items to forums discussing things I won't repeat here. The link was embedded in a post on one of those forums. No description, just a string of random characters ending in .onion. I hovered over it, finger poised on the trackpad. Some part of my brain was sending warning signals, like when you're about to touch something that might be hot. I should have listened to that instinct. Instead, I clicked. The page that loaded was unlike the others. Most dark websites I'd seen were basic, with minimal graphics and simple layouts, function over form. This one had a sleek, almost professional design. Black background, crimson text, a layout that reminded me of auction sites like eBay, but with a far more ominous aesthetic. At the top of the page was a logo, just a simple red circle, and below it the words, "The Crimson Room, bidding now open." I frowned, trying to figure out what kind of auction site this was. There were no product images, just listings with numbers and brief descriptions that made little sense to me at first glance. Each listing had a timer counting down and a current bid amount. The amounts were substantial, thousands in Bitcoin. It took me several minutes of confused browsing to understand what I was looking at, and when realization dawned, it hit me like a physical blow. These weren't products being auctioned, they were people. Each listing included basic details, age, gender, location, and a description of what would happen to them depending on which package received the highest bid. My stomach clenched, a wave of nausea washing over me. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate roleplay, a sick fantasy site where nothing actually happened. I tried to convince myself of this as I scrolled through the listings, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I noticed a section labeled Previous Events. I clicked it, though every instinct was screaming at me not to. It contained archives of past sessions, thumbnails that you could click to access recordings. My cursor hovered over one, trembling slightly. Again, that voice in my head begging me not to click. Again, my curiosity overriding it. The video that loaded was grainy but clear enough. I managed about 30 seconds before slamming my laptop shut, rushing to the bathroom, and vomiting until there was nothing left but bile. What I'd seen wasn't fake. The terror in that person's eyes, the sounds they made despite being gagged. There's a quality to genuine fear that can't be acted, can't be faked. And the clinical, almost bored manner of the masked figure carrying out the requests. It was real. All of it was real. I sat on the cold bathroom floor for what felt like hours, shaking uncontrollably. The storm outside had reached its peak, rain lashing against the window, wind howling through the gaps in the frames. Every noise made me flinch. My mind kept replaying those 30 seconds, unable to process that human beings could do such things to each other, that other human beings would pay to watch or direct it. Eventually, I managed to pull myself together enough to return to the living room. My laptop sat on the sofa where I'd left it, closed but somehow threatening, as if what I'd seen might leak out from between the keys. I needed to report this to the police, to someone who could do something about it. But what could I actually tell them? I had no specific information about where these events were taking place, who was running the site, or who the victims were. And I'd have to admit to accessing the dark web, to following link after link, until I found something so profoundly disturbing. I decided to go back, just long enough to gather some information that might be useful to authorities. This was my second mistake. I opened the laptop, steeling myself against what I might see. The browser was still connected, the site still open. I began taking screenshots, noting down any details that might help identify the location or the people involved. I was so focused on this self-appointed mission that I didn't notice it at first, the small notification that had appeared in the corner of the screen. When I finally saw it, my blood ran cold. A private message from an account named Admin. The message was simple. They had detected unusual activity from my connection, specifically the taking of screenshots. They had my IP address, despite the VPN, which had apparently failed at some point. They knew my approximate location, and they were sending someone to discuss my interest in their services. I slammed the laptop shut again, yanked out the power cord, and pulled the battery for good measure. Then I grabbed my phone and keys and ran out of the flat without even stopping for a jacket, despite the storm raging outside. I spent that night at a 24-hour cafe in the city center, jumping at every person who entered, convinced they had been sent to find me. In the harsh light of morning, huddled over my fifth cup of coffee, I tried to rationalize what had happened. It was probably just an automated message designed to scare people who stumbled across the site. They wouldn't really send someone after a random person who had accidentally found their operation. That would draw attention, create risk. It wasn't logical. This rationalization helped me function enough to return to my flat, pack a bag, and go straight to the train station. I spent the remaining holiday with my parents, making excuses about missing home. I didn't touch my laptop again until I was back at university, and when I did, I completely wiped it and reinstalled everything from scratch. I never reported what I'd seen. The fear of not being believed, of somehow being implicated, was too great. And deep down, there was a more terrifying thought. What if reporting it led them back to me? What if they had connections in law enforcement? It seemed paranoid, but after what I'd seen, my understanding of what people were capable of had fundamentally changed. For weeks afterward, I was certain I was being watched. I took different routes home from lectures, avoided being alone when possible, and slept with a chair propped against my bedroom door. I kept seeing the same car parked near our flat, a black sedan with tinted windows. Probably a coincidence, but it was enough to make me move out mid-semester, finding a new place on the other side of the city. The fear has faded somewhat with time. I no longer jump at every unexpected sound or suspect every stranger of being sent to silence me. I've almost convinced myself that the message was just an automated scare tactic. Almost. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night and the wind is rattling the windows, I remember what I saw. I remember that somewhere out there right now, those auctions are still happening. People are still bidding, still watching, still directing. And I know something else too. They have my information. Maybe they've forgotten about me, filed me away as an insignificant breach not worth pursuing. Or maybe they're just waiting for the right moment. I changed my number, my email addresses, even my name on social media. I've moved twice more since then, but in my darker moments, I wonder if it's enough. The internet never forgets, and neither do the people who lurk in its darkest corners. Last week, I received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name and current address. An address I've only had for 3 months. Inside was a blank sheet of paper with a small red circle drawn in the center. I'm leaving the country next week. Exchange program to Australia, as far away as I can get. I haven't told anyone where I'm going except my parents and the university administration. This will be my last post online anywhere, under any name. If you're reading this, don't make the same mistakes I did. Some curiosities aren't worth satisfying. Some dares aren't worth accepting. And some corners of the internet should remain unexplored. I think there's someone outside my window. I can see a shadow moving across the garden. It's probably just a neighbor, or maybe a fox, but I'm not taking any chances. I still remember how normal Jamie looked on my screen that night. The same messy bedroom in the background, the same faded band poster on the wall, the same person I'd known since secondary school, smiling at me through my laptop. There wasn't a single warning sign that in just a few minutes, everything I thought I knew about my oldest friend would shatter, leaving me trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'm writing this down because I need to process what happened, but I can't bring myself to tell a therapist. They'd be obligated to report it, and honestly, I'm terrified of what might happen if this gets out. so I'm putting it here anonymously, hoping that maybe someone will understand or at least learn from my experience. Perhaps writing it out will help me make sense of how someone I trusted completely could do something so horrific. Last winter, I was in my final year at university in Edinburgh, while Jamie was working in London. We'd been close since we were 13, the kind of friendship that survives distance and time. We had a standing FaceTime call every other Thursday, just to catch up and stay connected despite being hundreds of miles apart. These calls were a highlight in my otherwise stressful week of coursework and part-time jobs. Just a normal ritual between friends, nothing unusual or concerning about it. That particular Thursday in November was miserable outside, raining so hard I could hear it drumming against my window in the student flat. I remember being grateful I didn't have to go anywhere that evening. I'd made a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and settled in for our usual hour-long chat. The call connected, and there was Alex, looking slightly tired but smiling as always. The first 20 minutes were completely normal. We talked about our weeks, complained about work and studies, gossiped about mutual friends. Jamie had recently started a new job at a tech company, something to do with cybersecurity that I didn't fully understand, but sounded impressive. There had been a lot of talk about dark web monitoring and threat assessment, terms that meant little to me at the time, but would soon take on a horrifying new significance. I noticed Jamie seemed a bit distracted, occasionally glancing to the side at something off screen. I didn't think much of it, probably just checking messages or emails. But then there was a shift in the conversation. Jamie asked if I was alone in my flat, if my roommates were out for the evening. They were, a detail I confirmed without hesitation, because why wouldn't I? This was Jamie after all. That's when everything changed. Jamie's expression became more serious, more focused. There was this intensity in those eyes that I'd never seen before. Jamie leaned closer to the camera and said that there was something important to show me, something I needed to see to understand the work being done at the new company. I remember feeling a flicker of unease at the sudden change in tone, but I brushed it off. This was my oldest friend, someone I trusted implicitly. When Jamie said to keep an open mind about what I was about to see, I nodded, curious but unsuspecting. Jamie's screen went black for a moment, then changed to a screen share. I expected to see some kind of technical diagram or perhaps a presentation. Instead, the screen filled with what looked like a video feed of a room I didn't recognize. The space was dimly lit with a reddish tint, giving everything a surreal, almost dreamlike quality. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Just a sparse room with concrete walls, what looked like a metal table, and some shapes I couldn't quite distinguish. Then the camera angle shifted slightly, and I realized with a jolt that there was a person in the room, strapped to a chair. They were struggling against their restraints, their movements desperate and terrified. The video quality was good enough that I could see the fear in their eyes, the way their chest heaved with panicked breathing. I felt my stomach drop. My first thought was that this must be some kind of prank, or maybe a clip from a horror film Alex was showing me as a joke. But deep down, I knew immediately that what I was seeing was real. There was an authenticity to the fear in that person's eyes that no actor could replicate. On the side of the screen, there was some kind of chat interface where messages were scrolling by too quickly to read. At the bottom were buttons or commands with labels I couldn't quite make out from my view. It looked like some kind of interactive live stream, but unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I was frozen in shock, unable to process what was happening. Before I could even form words to ask what the hell was going on, Jamie's voice came through, explaining that this was what was called a red room on the dark web, a live stream where viewers could watch and even request acts of violence in real time. Jamie spoke with a detached fascination, like this was an interesting documentary we were watching together, rather than a real person in terror. The worst part was how casual Jamie sounded, while explaining that the company wasn't just monitoring these sites, they were running some of them. That this was where the real money was in cybersecurity, creating and managing these illegal streams for wealthy clients who paid thousands to watch or participate. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Alex, my friend since childhood, showing me something so horrific with such calm detachment. But the video continued playing, and the person in the chair continued struggling, and Alex continued explaining how the whole operation worked. Then came the moment that still haunts my nightmares. Jamie said that the company had been impressed with my psychology background and computer skills, that they'd been watching me through Jamie for months, that they thought I had potential to join their special projects team, and to prove I was suitable, I needed to participate tonight. The camera on my laptop suddenly lit up, indicating it was active even though I hadn't touched it. On Alex's shared screen, my face appeared in a small window above the video feed. My name appeared in the chat scroll. Whoever was running this stream now knew who I was. I could see my own horrified expression alongside the victim in the room. I tried to end the call, but my computer wouldn't respond. I tried to close the laptop, but Jamie's voice sharpened, warning me that closing the connection now would be seen as rejection of their offer. And they didn't allow people to reject offers once they'd seen what I'd seen. The implication was clear. I was being recorded watching this. I was now implicated, my face and name captured alongside this horrific content. If I didn't cooperate, that recording could be sent to the police, to my university, to my family, or worse, I could end up like the person in that chair. My mind was spinning with panic and betrayal. This person I trusted for over a decade had just dragged me into something nightmarish without my consent. Had Jamie always been this person? Or had something changed? I couldn't reconcile the friend I thought I knew with the monster on my screen. Jamie instructed me to select one of the commands from the menu that had appeared on my screen. Simple options were available for first-time participants, I was told. Nothing too extreme. Just enough to prove my commitment. I felt physically sick, tears streaming down my face as I realized the impossible situation I was in. If I participated, I would be complicit in someone's suffering. If I refused, I could be implicated or become a victim myself. There seemed to be no way out. In desperation, I yanked my router's power cable from the wall, cutting my internet connection entirely. The screen froze, then went black. The silence in my flat was deafening after the intensity of what had just happened. I sat there shaking for what felt like hours, expecting my phone to ring, expecting someone to knock on my door, expecting some immediate consequence for my refusal to participate. But nothing happened that night. The next day, I went to the campus IT department and had them check my laptop for any spyware or malicious software. I made up a story about getting strange pop-ups. They found nothing unusual. I changed all my passwords, deleted my social media accounts, and bought a new laptop just to be safe. I never heard from Jamie again. My messages went unanswered. Social media profiles disappeared. Mutual friends said they hadn't been in touch either. It was as if Jamie had vanished completely. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every notification, every unexpected sound. I covered my laptop camera with tape. I changed my phone number, moved to a different flat. I even considered dropping out of university and moving back home. But the fear that whatever Alex was involved with could find me there too kept me from running. It's been 6 months now. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was all some elaborate hoax or nightmare. But then I'll see a news story about dark web arrests, or I'll catch a glimpse of someone who resembles the person in that chair, and it all comes flooding back. I still don't know if Jamie was forced into recruiting me, if there really is a company using cybersecurity as a front for these streams, or if my oldest friend had been hiding a dark fascination that eventually evolved into participation. I don't know if I'm still being watched, or if cutting the connection that night was enough to remove me from their radar. What I do know is that trust is fragile, and the people closest to us can hide unimaginable secrets. I know that somewhere in the darkest corners of the internet, these rooms exist, and real people suffer while others watch. And I know that someone I love tried to drag me into that darkness. I check over my shoulder constantly now. I live with a persistent, gnawing fear that someday my laptop will turn on by itself, or my phone will ring with a FaceTime call from an unknown number, and I'll see that room again. Or worse, that someday I'll be the one in the chair, punishment for refusing to participate when given the chance. The most terrifying part isn't even the red room itself. It's that someone I trusted completely, someone whose face I would never have questioned seeing on my screen, was the doorway to that horror. And now, I can't trust any face at all. I want to tell you about something that happened to me last February. It's pretty messed up, and I haven't really told anyone about it until now. I figured it might be worth sharing, both to get it off my chest and because, well, maybe it could prevent someone else from falling into the same trap I did. It all started when I received an invitation to test out a new VR experience at a place called Neosensory in Manchester. What was supposed to be a simple tech preview turned into one of the most disturbing experiences of my life, and opened my eyes to a dark reality hiding behind cutting-edge technology. I've always been into tech, especially gaming and VR. I studied computer science at university but dropped out in my final year when my anxiety got too overwhelming. Since then, I've worked various tech support jobs, most recently at a mobile phone shop in Manchester. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me connected to the industry I loved. In my spare time, I ran a moderately successful gaming blog where I reviewed indie titles and new VR experiences. It wasn't huge, maybe 5,000 monthly readers, but enough that I occasionally received invitations to preview events or beta tests. That's how I ended up at Neosensory last February. Their PR team emailed me about a new VR experience center they were opening in an old industrial building near the Northern Quarter. According to the email, they were pioneering next-generation haptic feedback technology that promised to blur the line between virtual and physical sensation. They were offering free sessions to selected tech enthusiasts in exchange for feedback before their official launch. No obligation to write positively about it, just an honest assessment of the experience. I'd heard vague rumors about Neosensory on some tech forums, whispers about military funding and experimental neural interfaces, but nothing concrete. What caught my attention was a comment on a dark web discussion board I occasionally monitored for my blog, where someone claimed Neosensory had developed technology based on classified research into pain response management. At the time, I dismissed it as the usual conspiracy nonsense that circulates in those spaces. Now, I wish I'd paid more attention. The Neosensory building itself was impressive, a converted textile factory with the original brick exterior, but completely modernized inside. The reception area featured minimalist white furnishings, ambient electronic music, and staff dressed in matching grey uniforms. I remember thinking it felt more like a high-end spa than a gaming center. The receptionist scanned my invitation QR code, had me sign a digital waiver on a tablet without really giving me time to read it, and then directed me to a preparation room. This first room contained what looked like standard VR equipment, headsets, haptic gloves, and the usual motion sensors, but with some modifications I hadn't seen before. Most notably, Each set included what they called neural feedback pads that attached to your temples, wrists, and the base of your spine. The staff member explained these would enhance sensory immersion by creating precise neurological feedback loops. It sounded impressive but vague, the kind of technobabble that tech companies often use to make simple concepts sound revolutionary. After a brief orientation, I was led to a private booth, a space about 3 meters square with padded walls and a suspended harness system that allowed free movement while preventing you from hitting anything. The staff member helped me into the full gear: headset, gloves, feedback pads, and a lightweight exosuit that applied pressure to various muscle groups to simulate physical resistance. Once everything was connected and calibrated, they left me alone in the booth. The VR environment loaded up, presenting itself as Consequence Level 1. The virtual space appeared to be a stark white room with various objects on pedestals: a glass of water, a candle, a rose, a block of ice. A floating interface invited me to explore physical consequences in a safe environment. It seemed like a basic haptic demonstration program, designed to showcase the system's ability to simulate different textures and sensations. I began interacting with the virtual objects and immediately noticed the extraordinary fidelity of the sensations. When I touched the virtual ice, my fingertips felt genuinely cold. The candle flame produced actual warmth. The rose petal's texture was impossibly realistic. I tried dozens of haptic systems before, but nothing came close to this level of sensory precision. I remember thinking this technology must have cost millions to develop. After about 10 minutes of these basic interactions, the environment changed. The white room dissolved, replaced by what appeared to be a realistic apartment interior. On a virtual screen on the wall, text appeared explaining that this was Consequence Level 2, where I would experience emotional and physical cause and effect in a realistic environment. The objectives seemed simple: complete everyday tasks, while the system created appropriate sensory feedback. As I moved through the virtual apartment, interacting with objects, I began to notice something odd. Occasionally, when I performed certain actions, dropping a plate, closing a drawer, turning on a tap, I would hear faint sounds that didn't seem to match the virtual environment. Something like muffled gasps or sharp intakes of breath. At first, I assumed it was just part of the ambient sound design. But the sounds occurred inconsistently, only following specific actions. The system guided me through increasingly complex tasks, eventually introducing stress elements like time challenges. During one timed cooking simulation, I accidentally knocked over a virtual pan of boiling water. The haptic feedback delivered a mild sensation of heat to my arm, but more disturbingly, I distinctly heard what sounded like a cry of pain from somewhere outside the simulation. The sound was quickly masked by the program's audio effects, but it left me unsettled. When I completed Level 2, the environment shifted again. Consequence. Level 3 transported me to what appeared to be a sterile laboratory setting. The interface explained this level would explore physical consequence escalation and test my threshold for causal comfort. The objectives became more bizarre. Use various implements on test subjects represented as featureless mannequins. Adjust environmental controls that cause visible discomfort to these figures. Manipulate emotional states through physical stimuli. The disembodied sounds became more frequent and distinct, definitely human reactions corresponding to my actions in the simulation. When I used a virtual scalpel on a mannequin, I heard a stifled scream. When I adjusted temperature controls to extremes, there were sounds of shivering or panting. The haptic feedback to my own body remained mild and manageable, but something about the audio felt increasingly wrong, increasingly real. I tried removing the headset, suddenly uncomfortable with whatever I was participating in, but discovered it wouldn't detach. The neural feedback pads seemed to have formed some kind of temporary bond with my skin. I called out for assistance, but no one came. Instead, the program advanced automatically to consequence level 4. The laboratory environment expanded, revealing glass-walled cells containing actual human figures rather than mannequins. Each person wore equipment similar to mine, but with more extensive neural pads covering much of their bodies. With sickening clarity, I realized what was happening. My virtual actions were controlling real physical sensations being delivered to actual people. The haptic feedback I was receiving was merely a fraction of what they were experiencing. An interface appeared, explicitly confirming my suspicions. Direct neural stimulation now linked. Your actions equal their consequences. Premium dark web streaming active. Current viewers, 152. Current Bitcoin revenue, 3.28. I wasn't merely a tester of new VR technology. I was an unwitting torturer providing entertainment for paying viewers on the dark web. The sensation of ice on my fingertips corresponded to freezing pain for someone else. The warmth from the candle translated to burning agony for my involuntary partner. Every interaction I'd found so impressively realistic had caused genuine suffering to someone being held in this facility. In horrified panic, I tried again to remove the equipment, pulling frantically at the headset and gloves. This triggered what the system called a non-compliance protocol. A brief but excruciating electrical shock delivered through the neural pads. A message informed me that removing the equipment prematurely would cause terminal feedback to both myself and my connected subjects. For what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, I was forced to continue participating, trying to minimize the actions that seemed to cause the most severe reactions. Eventually, a countdown timer appeared, indicating the session was nearing completion. When it reached 0, the system began a shutdown sequence, and the equipment finally released its hold on me. As the headset lifted away, I caught a glimpse of multiple screens on the booth's wall that had been hidden before. They showed various angles of rooms containing people connected to equipment similar to mine, their bodies responding to whatever was happening in their corresponding simulations. Some were clearly unconscious, others writhing in obvious distress. One screen displayed what appeared to be a bidding interface with usernames and cryptocurrency amounts. I stumbled out of the booth, dizzy and disoriented, to find the preparation room empty. The reception area was similarly deserted, with no sign of the staff who had greeted me earlier. The building's main door was unlocked, and I fled into the street, gasping for air that didn't reek of sanitizer and fear. I spent that night deliberating whether to contact the police. By morning, I convinced myself I should, but when I returned to the address with 2 officers, we found the building completely empty. No VR equipment, no booths, not even the reception desk. Just an empty industrial space with bare walls and a concrete floor. The officers took my statement but clearly didn't believe me, especially when they couldn't find any record of a company called Neosensory, registered at that address or anywhere in Manchester. 2 weeks later, I received an email from an encrypted address containing only a video file. The footage showed me during my session, my face contorted with fascination and then horror as I gradually realized what I was participating in. Below the video was a message: Level 5 access granted. Premium controller status available. Your unique neural signature has been catalogued. Distance operation now possible. I destroyed my laptop, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and moved to a different city. But I can't escape the knowledge of what I participated in, or the fear that somehow, through that brief neural connection, they still have access to me. Sometimes my fingers tingle unexpectedly, as if holding phantom controllers. Sometimes I feel the ghost of those neural pads against my skin. And sometimes, when I pass someone on the street who winces suddenly or gasps in unexpected pain, I wonder if somewhere, someone is playing a game with real consequences. using the neural signature they harvested from me as their unwitting proxy in the physical world. I barely slept in the past 2 weeks. Every little sound makes me jump now. The refrigerator humming, a car door closing outside, the heating system clicking on. I keep thinking I hear things that aren't there, voices hidden in everyday noises. The more I keep this bottled up, the more I feel like I'm going to lose my mind completely, so here goes. I work as an audio engineer at a small recording studio in Bristol. Nothing fancy or high profile, mostly local bands and podcast production. But I've always had a good ear for sound. That's what makes this whole thing so much worse. I should have noticed it sooner. I should have recognized what I was hearing the first time. About 3 weeks ago, my friend Alex sent me a message asking if I could give some feedback on a music track he was working on. We've known each other since university, where we both studied sound engineering, but while I went into studio work, he took a more experimental route with electronic music. He's always sending me works in progress, asking for my opinion on mixing or mastering, and I'm usually happy to help. It's a good arrangement. I keep my critical listening skills sharp, and he gets free professional feedback. The track he sent me that night was different from his usual style. He described it as ambient experimental, with some field recordings mixed in. He said he'd been playing around with layering environmental sounds to create atmosphere beneath the music. That didn't seem unusual to me. Field recordings are common in certain genres, and Alex was always trying new techniques. I remember it was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. I just finished a late session at the studio and was unwinding at my desk at home with a glass of whiskey, still wearing the clothes I'd worked in all day. My flat was quiet, except for the occasional car passing on the wet street outside. It had been raining all day, one of those endless grey February days that make you feel like summer might never come again. I put on my studio headphones, the expensive ones I use for detailed listening, and downloaded Alex's track. It was about 8 minutes long, which seemed a bit excessive for a demo, but that was typical of Alex. He's never been one for radio-friendly 3-minute songs. The track started with a low drone, gradually building with subtle electronic elements. Nothing unusual there. Around the 2-minute mark, the field recordings began to blend in. What sounded like distant traffic, wind through trees, maybe the ambient noise of a public space. It was actually quite effective, creating this sense of physical space within the music. But around 4 minutes in, something caught my attention. Behind the main elements, almost completely buried in the mix, I could hear what sounded like voices. This isn't uncommon in field recordings. You often pick up snippets of conversation when recording in public places, but something about these voices made me uneasy. They sounded tense, maybe frightened. I adjusted the equalization on my computer, boosting the mid-range frequencies where human voices typically sit, and played that section again. With the adjustment, I could make out more clearly what sounded like a person, possibly a woman, speaking urgently. The words weren't clear, but the tone definitely conveyed distress. I paused the track, feeling suddenly uncomfortable. I told myself it was just an interesting sample Alex had found online or recorded from a film. Field recordings often have strange, ambiguous sounds that your brain tries to interpret as something recognizable. Audio engineers call it pareidolia, like seeing faces in clouds, but with sound. Your brain tries to find patterns, meaning, where there might be none. I continued listening, but now I was focused entirely on the background elements. As the track progressed, the voices became slightly more prominent. Around the 6-minute mark, buried under a swelling synth pad, I distinctly heard what sounded like someone screaming. It was distant, heavily processed with reverb, but unmistakable once I'd noticed it. and it didn't sound like it was from a film or staged. It had a raw, desperate quality that made my skin crawl. I stopped the track again and took off my headphones, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was beating. The silence of my flat felt oppressive now. I took a large sip of whiskey, trying to calm myself down. I was being ridiculous. Alex was just experimenting with unsettling samples to create atmosphere. That's all it was. I put my headphones back on, determined to finish listening professionally. The final 2 minutes of the track became increasingly chaotic, with the background voices and sounds growing more prominent beneath the music. What I'd initially perceived as artistic ambient noise now sounded like a deliberate attempt to mask something disturbing. The screams, though still distant, seemed to multiply. And underneath it all, there was a rhythmic sound I couldn't quite identify. Mechanical, repetitive. When the track finally ended, I sat in silence for several minutes. A rational part of my brain was saying that Alex had simply created a disturbing piece of experimental music. Maybe he'd sampled horror movies or found some creepy sounds online. But another part of me, the part that had spent years training to distinguish subtle details in audio, was deeply unsettled. I played the track again, this time opening it in my professional audio software where I could visualize the sound waves and separate the frequencies. With the proper tools, I began isolating different layers of the recording. The main musical elements were clearly composed and synthetic, as expected, but the background field recordings appeared to be a single continuous audio file that had been processed to sound distant. When I isolated this layer and enhanced it, what I heard made me physically recoil from my desk. It was unmistakably people in extreme distress. Multiple voices begging, screaming, crying. The mechanical sound I'd noticed was clearer now too. Something repetitive and metallic, like a crank or lever being operated. And beneath it all, almost imperceptible even with enhancement, was a voice speaking calmly, methodically, giving instructions. I felt physically sick. This couldn't be some creative sample Alex had found. It was too raw, too consistent. It sounded like genuine audio of people being tortured. With shaking hands, I sent Alex a message, asking about the source of the field recordings. His response came quickly. Just some stuff I found in an interesting corner of the web. Thought it added a unique atmosphere. Too intense. That vague answer only increased my unease. I pressed him, asking directly if he knew what the voices in the background were. He replied that he hadn't noticed any distinct voices, just atmospheric noise. Either he was lying, or he genuinely hadn't heard what was clearly audible to my trained ear once I knew to look for it. Neither option was comforting. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what I'd heard and what it might mean. The next morning, I decided to extract the background audio layer completely and run it through additional filters to clean it up further. What emerged was far worse than I'd initially thought. The clearer audio revealed what sounded like a methodical session where someone was calmly directing the torture of multiple people. The most disturbing part was that the voice occasionally referenced viewers or an audience, as if this was being streamed or recorded specifically for others to watch. I'd heard of red rooms on the dark web, supposedly live streams of torture or worse that people paid to watch. Most experts said they were urban legends, technically impossible to stream reliably through Tor networks. But what if they were real? What if instead of streaming video, which requires significant bandwidth, they distributed high-quality audio recordings afterward? I felt caught in an impossible situation. If what I'd heard was real, it was evidence of horrific crimes. But going to the police would mean explaining how I came to possess it, potentially implicating myself and definitely implicating Alex. And would they even take it seriously? It would sound insane. Claims of hidden torture audio in an experimental music track. I decided to dig deeper first. I checked the audio file's metadata, looking for any clues about its origin. The original field recording had been created 3 months earlier, according to the timestamp. But more disturbing was a hidden comment in the metadata, a string of random characters followed by .onion, unmistakably a dark web address. That night, Alex sent me another message asking what I thought of the track. I gave him some vague technical feedback, afraid to reveal what I'd discovered. He seemed pleased and mentioned he had more experimental audio he'd like my opinion on, if I was interested. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. What if Alex was involved in something terrible? What if he was testing me somehow, seeing if I would notice the hidden sounds? Or worse, what if he wasn't the one who put them there at all? What if someone had compromised his computer or accounts? A week after receiving the track, I received an anonymous email. The subject line was simply those same random characters I'd found in the metadata. The body contained only 2 sentences. We noticed you've been listening very carefully. Would you like to hear more? I immediately deleted the email and shut down my computer. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled my drink across my desk. Someone knew I'd isolated that audio. Someone was watching. I haven't responded to any of Alex's messages since then. I bought a new laptop and phone. I stay at different friends' houses, never in my own flat for more than a few hours to collect essentials. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'm being followed. The worst part is the uncertainty. Was what I heard actually real? Or was it an elaborate hoax? Is Alex involved? Or is he being used somehow? And who sent that email? I don't know if I'll ever have answers, and I'm too afraid to keep looking. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I can hear those screams again, hidden beneath the normal sounds of the world around me. And I wonder how many other recordings like that are out there, with horrors hidden in their background noise, waiting for someone with the right ear to discover them. Okay, so this might just be me, but have you ever had a moment when your phone screen shows you something disturbing and you immediately check over your shoulder to make sure no one can see what you're looking at, even when you're completely alone? 4 months ago, I experienced something on the dark web that I've been unable to shake from my mind. So here goes. It started on an entirely ordinary Tuesday evening. I just finished a late dinner, microwave lasagna, nothing special, and was sitting on the toilet, mindlessly scrolling through my phone as one does. I'd been fascinated with the dark web for about a year by that point. Not because I wanted anything illegal, mind you. I've always been the curious type, ever since I was a kid taking apart my toys to see how they worked. Studied computer science at university. Worked in IT for 8 years now. I suppose that's why I first downloaded Tor. Professional curiosity, I told myself. A bit of a lie, that. I browse the dark web occasionally when bored, usually after a few drinks. Mostly just looking at marketplaces selling counterfeit goods or dodgy pharmaceuticals. Nothing too sinister. Though there was always that thrill of knowing I was somewhere I perhaps shouldn't be, like a digital urban explorer. That night, I'd had a couple of whiskeys after a particularly stressful day at work. My boss had been on my case about some server issues that weren't even my department. The bathroom was the only place my flatmate wouldn't disturb me. So there I sat, trousers around my ankles, scrolling through forums I had no business visiting. I'd found my way onto a form I hadn't seen before. Black background, red text, very 90s web design. The site claimed to be for practical solutions to complex problems. Vague enough to sound legitimate at first glance. I was scrolling through thread titles, mostly stuff about bypassing security systems or creating untraceable identities, when I saw a post titled DIY Silence Methods. My finger hovered over it for a moment. The title was just ambiguous enough that it could have been about soundproofing a room or creating white noise to help with sleep, but something in my gut told me it wasn't. Still, curiosity got the better of me. It always does, doesn't it? I tapped the thread. The page loaded slowly. Tor's never been known for its speed, and what appeared made me physically recoil. The thread contained meticulously detailed guides for creating homemade torture devices. Not historical information or theoretical concepts, but step-by-step instructions with diagrams showing how to build tools specifically designed to cause pain without leaving visible marks. Tools designed to extract information while keeping the victim conscious. Tools designed for silence. I remember my bathroom suddenly felt very cold. The radiator had been on full blast. My flatmate always complained about my excessive heating bills, but I felt goosebumps forming on my arms. What disturbed me most wasn't just the content itself, but the clinical, almost academic tone, as if the author was explaining how to assemble IKEA furniture, not instruments of suffering. And worse still, with the comments beneath each design, users suggesting improvements or sharing their field test results. I should have closed the app immediately, should have deleted Tor, reset my phone, and forgotten the whole thing. Instead, like a witness to a car crash, I couldn't look away. I scrolled further, reading through post after post. People were casually discussing the merits of different techniques, like they were reviewing kitchen appliances. This method is too messy for apartment use. This one tends to cause unconsciousness too quickly. I found adding this modification extends the process by several hours. My stomach churned. The microwave lasagna threatened to make a reappearance. Yet I kept scrolling, telling myself I was just documenting the depravity, as if I was some sort of digital anthropologist studying the darkest corners of humanity. What a load of rubbish. I was rubbernecking at human suffering. But that's when I noticed the view counter at the bottom of the thread. Only 3 people were currently viewing this horrendous content. The forum administrator, someone with the rank field expert, and me. 3 people in a hidden corner of the internet that should require specific knowledge even to find. I suddenly felt very exposed, like I'd wandered into a private meeting I wasn't invited to. As I was about to close the app, a notification appeared at the top of my screen. A private message. The username matched the field expert, currently viewing the thread. My thumb hovered over the notification. Every instinct told me not to open it. But again, that damn curiosity. I tapped it. First time browsing our resources. I notice you've been on this page for 16 minutes, looking for something specific. I offer practical demonstrations for serious clients. My blood ran cold. 16 minutes. Had I really been staring at this horror show for that long? And what did they mean by practical demonstrations? I didn't respond, immediately closing the app and shutting off my phone entirely. I sat there in the bathroom, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. Trousers around my ankles, the faint drip of the leaky tap, the only sound breaking the silence. I finally gathered myself, washed my hands thoroughly, as if I could somehow clean away what I'd seen, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept thinking about how the person had known exactly how long I'd been viewing the thread. Was there some tracker embedded in the page? Had I compromised my anonymity somehow? I told myself I was being paranoid. The dark web is supposed to be anonymous. That's the whole point. This was probably just a scammer trying to frighten naive browsers into paying for services that didn't exist. The next morning, I convinced myself it was nothing to worry about. Just another internet weirdo trying to seem more dangerous than they actually were. I went to work, had a relatively normal day, and had almost put the incident out of my mind by the time I got home. Almost. That evening, I received an email to my personal account, not my work email or any address I'd ever used at all. The subject line, regarding your interest in silence methods. The body contained only an attachment, a PDF. I scanned it with 3 different antivirus programs before opening it. It wasn't malware, it was worse. The PDF contained a customized silence method, tailored specifically for someone matching my exact physical description. Height, weight, even the small scar on my left wrist from a childhood accident. The document detailed how my apartment layout, which it described with disturbing accuracy, would provide optimal acoustics for the procedure. It mentioned how my neighbor's hearing impairment would be advantageous. It specified which of my kitchen implements would be most effective. I felt the world tilt sideways. How could they possibly know these things about me? I'd been so careful with my identity online. I'd used Tor correctly. I'd never entered personal information. My hands shook as I deleted the email, then emptied my trash folder, as if that would somehow protect me. I spent that night at a friend's house, making up some story about a water leak in my flat. I didn't sleep. Couldn't even close my eyes without seeing those diagrams, now with my face superimposed on the victim. The next day, I contacted my internet provider, changed all my passwords, and factory reset my phone. I convinced myself that someone had hacked my device, that it was all just an elaborate scam to frighten me. I almost believed it too. 3 days later, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was visibly disturbed. But on my kitchen table sat a small metal object I'd never seen before. It matched exactly one of the components shown in the torture device diagrams, a custom thumb screw with peculiar modifications. Beside it was a handwritten note. For your consideration, field testing appointment scheduled for Friday. I didn't pack. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? That I'd been browsing torture methods on the dark web and now someone wanted to demonstrate them on me. I grabbed my passport, wallet, and the clothes on my bag. I drove straight to my parents' house in Scotland, 6 hours away, checking my rearview mirror the entire journey. I stayed there for 2 weeks, told them I was on holiday. When I finally returned to London, I moved to a new flat in a different area. I changed my phone number, email addresses, even deleted all my social media. I never went back on the dark web, never wanted to. It's been 4 months now, no more strange emails, no more unlocked doors or mysterious objects. I should feel safe, but I don't. Because here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Whoever found me didn't do it through some dark web tracking. They found me in the real world. They had physical access to my home, which means they weren't just some distant internet bogeyman. They were close, possibly someone I know, possibly someone I still interact with every day. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the toilet, scrolling through perfectly innocent websites on my new phone, I'll remember those diagrams. I'll remember how casually people discuss methods of causing unimaginable pain. And I'll wonder if the person who sent me that PDF is watching me right now, silently testing my new security, waiting for the perfect moment to reschedule our field testing appointment. Because that's the thing about the dark web. It's not just some abstract digital realm separate from our everyday lives. The people there are real. They live among us. They could be anyone. The friendly IT guy at your office, the quiet neighbor who always nods hello. And sometimes, when you glimpse their other life, they notice you noticing them, and they don't like it one bit. I haven't told my girlfriend this, not my family nor the police, definitely not the police. So I'm 29. I work in IT consulting in Birmingham. There's nothing special about my life really. I've got a decent flat, been with my girlfriend for 3 years, and I hang out with the same group of friends I've known since uni. My job is mostly remote troubleshooting for corporate clients, which is basically me spending all day on video calls telling executives how to restart their computers or find files they've misplaced. My friend Mark and I go way back to our first year at uni, where we both did computer science. He was always the one taking risks. While I went into boring corporate IT, he got into cybersecurity and now does penetration testing for a living. Basically, companies pay him to hack into their systems to find weaknesses. We don't work in the same field anymore, but we still game online most weeks and grab a pint when we can. So this Friday night in March, we're doing our usual thing, playing some online games. My girlfriend was away at her sister's for the weekend. Around 10, after a few rounds, Mark says he wants to show me something he found during a job. Nothing unusual there. He's always sending me weird coding stuff or security things he discovers. We switched to screen sharing on our voice chat. His desktop was a mess as usual, about 50 windows open because he never closes anything. He dug through some folders, then got all serious, asking if I was ready to see something intense. I laughed it off, thinking he was being dramatic about some security hole he'd found or something. That was just Mark's way, always making tech discoveries sound like he'd found buried treasure. He opened up this weird browser I didn't recognize, not Chrome or anything normal, something with a bare bones interface. When I asked about it, he said it was for accessing the dark web, all configured with security stuff and anonymizing features. That got my attention. I mean, I knew what the dark web was, that hidden part of the internet, where all the dodgy stuff happens, but I'd never had any reason to go there myself. Mark explained that during a job, he'd found some login credentials that led him into some pretty dark places online. He'd found what he called mind-blowing, some live streaming site that showed reality without filters. The way he described it, I thought maybe it was just some extreme version of reality TV or banned content too graphic for YouTube or something. Looking back, I should have noticed something was off. Mark's usually pretty chilled, but that night he had this weird energy, like nervous, but excited at the same time. Not like him at all. But I didn't think much of it then, just went along, because I was curious what had got him so worked up. He went through a bunch of login screens and eventually got to this site, black background, red text, very basic looking. It was set up kind of like Netflix, with thumbnails for different channels. Most were dark or just showing shadows, but one was active with what looked like a brightly lit room. Mark clicked on it and it filled the screen. What I saw was what looked like a basement or warehouse. Concrete walls, super bright, harsh lighting. In the middle was a bloke tied to a chair, blindfolded. Standing next to him was someone in dark clothes, wearing one of those plain white masks you see in horror films. My first thought was, this is some low-budget horror film or haunted house live stream. It looks staged, you know, too perfect, like a film set. I made some joke about how bad the production was, but Mark didn't laugh. Instead, he pointed to a chat window where people with weird usernames were posting comments and what looked like requests for things to happen. Mark then told me, dead serious, that this was called a red room, a live stream of actual torture or violence that people pay to watch and sometimes even control. I told him to shut it off, that it had to be fake, that nobody would be stupid enough to broadcast themselves committing actual crimes. He insisted it was real, that he'd checked with some security contacts, and that this stream was apparently one of the trusted ones in these circles. The fact he used the word trusted for something like this made me feel sick. I was about to disconnect when the person in the mask walked over to the guy in the chair and took off his blindfold. The bloke blinked in the bright light, looking around, and when I saw his face clearly, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I knew him. Not well, he wasn't a mate or family or anything, but definitely someone from my everyday life. He was the barista at the coffee shop near my office. I stopped there almost every morning. We weren't friends exactly, but we had that familiar thing you get with someone you see regularly. He always remembered my order, sometimes recommended new coffees. We'd chat about the weather or whatever. He'd mentioned once that he was working to save up for uni. And now here he was, tied up in what Mark was saying was a red room. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost on our video call, because Mark asked if I was okay. Without thinking, I blurted out that I knew the guy on the screen. Mark laughed at first, thinking I was joking. When I insisted, telling him exactly who it was and how I knew him, Mark's face went completely white. He suddenly seemed to realize what this meant. Either this was some crazy coincidence, or somehow the people running this stream were in the same city as me. Then things got really freaky. The chat on the stream suddenly went crazy. People started posting messages asking if someone had recognized the subject, if there had been a security breach. I realized with absolute horror that our conversation was somehow being monitored. Either Mark's computer was compromised, or the streaming site had access to our voice chat. Mark started frantically trying to close the browser, but it froze up. Messages kept appearing in the chat, now directly addressing the viewer who knows the subject. One user with an admin tag posted coordinates that were scarily close to my neighborhood. Mark ended the screen share and hung up on our call. I tried calling straight back, but he didn't answer. A few minutes later, I got a text from him telling me to turn off all my devices, not to contact him again, and to stay somewhere else that night. He said his system had been compromised, and whoever was running the stream now had info on both of us. I stayed at a hotel that night, paid cash, kept checking the news for anything about kidnappings or murders. Next morning, I went to the coffee shop, heart pounding the whole time. The barista was there, completely normal, serving customers like nothing had happened. He greeted me like usual, same as any other day. For a minute, I felt this massive relief. Maybe it was all fake, a prank, a lookalike, something like that. I actually managed to convince myself of this until I got back to my flat that afternoon and found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a photo, a screenshot from our video call, showing my face exactly at the moment when I recognized the barista. On the back, written in red ink, "Viewers become participants eventually." I haven't heard from Mark since. His social media disappeared a few days later. Our mutual friends told me he suddenly quit his job and moved abroad. The barista worked at the coffee shop for about another week, then just vanished. According to his co-workers, he didn't give notice or anything, just stopped showing up. I've moved flats, changed my phone number, set up new online accounts, got security cameras, take different routes to work every day, but I never feel safe. Every night when I'm trying to fall asleep, I keep seeing that moment when I recognized him, and I can't stop thinking about how these people know exactly who I am and where to find me. The worst part is not knowing. Was this whole thing set up? Did they deliberately pick someone from my daily life, knowing I'd be watching? Or was it just some horrible coincidence that of all the people they could have grabbed, they took someone I would recognize? I honestly don't know which is worse, that I randomly stumbled across this nightmare, or that I was the target all along.